Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Honda Classic DFS Tactics show. Quite a bit to get into. We're here for all of your last minute lineup questions. Last minute want to see this guy on this particular stat or this guy versus that guy. So we're here for all of that. So let's not delay. All statistics tonight and every night are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. I can't say anything more than I do every show in the intro. It's well worth the investment. It's going to make you a much better gambler, much smarter DFS player, all of that. It's the best tool out there. Go check them out. In the description of the video, there are links to my social media where I post my betting cards and any interesting research I find throughout the week leading up to the tournament and through the tournament. And I posed a question yesterday, or maybe it was Monday, that I had found a player in the 6Ks that had pretty much dominated the Korn Ferry Tour in the stats that I was focusing on this week. So make sure you hop over to my social media, see if you want to give a try at seeing if you can think of who that is. I'm not going to spoil it tonight either, because it's probably not somebody you would think. But hop on to social media there, see if you can guess who I'm thinking about. And then in the description as well, there is an email to get in contact with me if you want to be a part of bonus content, bonus videos, my tournament fact sheet that I send out to all my subscribers with my, best bets and favorite DFS plays and whatnot. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you reach out to the email in the description. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Want the interaction. Like I said, this guy or that guy. Any tactics that you're thinking about, whether you're going to go balanced or stars and scrubs or pivots and fades, we're here for all that. So let's figure out our tactics this week in the DFS slate for the 2022 Honda Classic. And as we do every week at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show, we are at the mixed condition model that I finalized earlier today. Let me pull up chat, get everything sorted up here. Now, I had focused all week on difficult rounds to par, and that is because the Honda PGA National is notorious for being difficult. The winning scores are generally in the single digits, and if they do make it to double digits, it's around 11 or 12, and the cut lines have been historically as high as +5, +6. So this is just not an easy course. The most famous part of it, the bear trap, 15, 16, 17. It's just difficult. It's just a really, really challenging course. And so before I get into that, let me explain, because everything will say last 36, and I'm just going to explain as I did last week. Granted, I used the wrong timelines, but in that vein, anything that you see that says last whatever difficult to par, and it's always going to be last 36 to this week, but difficult to par stretches to April 1st of 2021. That was kind of the cutoff for tournaments right after the Honda. So I didn't want to include last year's Honda Classic. We kind of did that throughout the week in the kind of color-coded spreadsheet that I put together every week for kind of past performance stats. So I didn't want to include the Honda. So anything that says difficult to par is from April the 1st, 2021 forward. That means any rounds that were measured by Fantasy National standards as difficult. And then anything that's just flat last 36 is back to the start of this PGA Tour season, back to the Fortinet. So at least the Europeans, guys like Tommy Fleetwood and Shane Lowry, guys like that, at least have some rounds. Granted, not as many as the majority of the others, but at least I am able to capture some amount of data for them, because that was my fatal flaw last week, is that I went from just the calendar year and pretty much ignored Rory and Sergio and Paul Casey, and it came back to bite me. So with that in mind, I went 10% into just strokes gained total on difficult courses or difficult rounds to par. I toyed with putting it at 15 since the Honda is almost always difficult every round. There are some rounds that it is played average, but generally speaking, it's all difficult. I put it at 10% because I wanted to focus on other things, but there is easily some justification for 15%. I didn't think at the beginning of the week off the tee was going to matter, but we saw throughout the week, especially in the data course detail and the comparison to other courses, how off the tee kind of mattered this week, and a lot of it seems to be centered around fairways, but distance did have a little bit too. So I put off the tee at 5%, strokes gained approach at 15%. As you climb the leaderboards from top 10s to top 5s to winners, strokes gained approach just got that more important. So if there was a statistic that I wanted to put 20% in, it would have been this. Again, I just kind of ran out of percent, kind of like up here where I could have put 15. Could easily put 20 here. I just left it at 15. Put 10% in putting on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. This stretches back to, I believe, the Honda as well. I can't quite remember, but anything that was measured as fast or lightning, fast or lightning on Bermuda greens is at 10%. And I mentioned all week how I was going to be focusing on bogeys, and as much as that is true, I didn't want to ignore guys who are able to make birdies on difficult circumstances, difficult courses. So I wanted to put 10 here, but I only had room for 5 each. Kind of is what it is. In the same vein, greens and regulation, difficult to par, 5%. So these 3 stats I kind of brought over from the Farmers, where Torrey Pines is normally pretty darn difficult, and it was actually average to easy this year just due to the circumstances. But I brought these over from the Farmers, and that was one of the weeks that I had done pretty well in my rankings overall, let alone pick the winner. So those are those 5%. I went a full 15 in both the par 3s and the par 4s. It has been no surprise, at least if you've been following me this week, that the par 3s are the most important hole by par, because the 5s are quite mitigated this week at PGA National. So the par 3s, very, very important. They're generally the most difficult holes on this course. So if you're able to get your pars, your par 3 scoring, you're going to do very, very well here. Same vein, par 4s, to me it's just the most important statistic in PGA Tour golf. Also, the range of the par 4s that are most important, put that at 10%. So I've got a full 25% in the par 4s here. And then lastly, I did not want to ignore par 5s completely, but instead of just total par 5s, there have been, a couple of years where literally every single round, both par 5s play in this range. Sometimes they'll move it to in between 550 and 600. Sometimes it plays 0 to 500, but majority of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, the par 5s play in this range. So I just put par 5s of this range. So there is my data model, and when I loaded the results, the rankings are a little bit of a surprise in terms of order, but probably not a lot of surprises who's up there. So number 1, Joaquin Neiman, coming off the win at the Genesis. He has been playing some fantastic golf. It's probably no surprise he would be up there in the rankings. Louis Oosthuizen being number 2. Again, I probably wouldn't have had him this high, but I knew he would be up there, especially considering I took some measured rounds from the fall. I mean, Louis is just a world-class player. You just have to avoid the withdrawals from him that seemingly happen randomly, but Louis is good for usually a withdrawal or two during the PGA Tour season. He's already done it in the fall. So Louis number 2, Aaron Wise number 3, Matthew Wolff number 4. We'll get to him when we go through the price board. And Mackenzie Hughes, who I've been pretty high on all week, is number 5. Even though he is more of a short game player around the green and putting. His stats actually played pretty darn well for PGA National. He's top 5 in par 4 scoring, top 15 in par 3 scoring, top 20 on difficult courses, top 20 in greens on difficult courses. So there's a lot to like with Mackenzie Hughes. Now his Honda form isn't exactly the best. He has made 3 cuts in the last 5 years here at Honda to some quite middling finishes. But 3 for 5 is something. And he's not so outrageously priced that you have to get a top 10 or better to justify his inclusion in your lineup. So there's the top 5. Let's round out the top 10 here real quick. Russell Knox, Denny Mccarthy, Sungjae, Daniel Berger, and Alex Smalley. Round out my top 10. Pereira, Bezadenhout, former winner here, Keith Mitchell, lurking just outside the top 10. Again, a little bit of surprise for some things. I really would have thought Sungjae would have been, in my top 3. He fell to 8th due to his poor performance on Bermuda greens. Just no other way to put it. And while he is good on difficult courses because he can avoid the bogeys, he really doesn't get many birdies. So if he's not birdieing, avoiding the bogeys really doesn't help because you're not gaining those back. He's good enough on difficult courses, but he's not as good as, honestly, I would have thought at initial thought process. Let's see. Other kind of surprises, guys that we have talked about throughout the week. Russell Knox. We had a pretty good discussion about him on Monday night and how he is just poor form here. I think he's 1 for 5 in making the cut. One of the worst average finishes for the guys that are in the field this week. So this will be a very, very interesting case study of current form versus past performance at the course. Clearly, this model is using only current form and the metrics I give it, so none of the past performance is brought into these rankings. So that's why he's rated 6th. He's best in the field in strokes gained approach, even better than Daniel Berger, better than Lowry, better than Neiman. He's number 1 in the field in strokes gained approach. He is number 2 in the field in par 3 scoring, and we've already mentioned how important that is here at PGA National. Number 1 in greens on difficult courses. So there's a lot to like with Russell Knox, with the exception being his prior performance here at the Honda. So, like I said, it'll be an interesting case study for Russell Knox. Let's see. Other guys that we've kind of been talking about. I was really, really high on Billy Horschel this week, and he did not rate out well in my data model. He is in this range somewhere. While I noticed that he's not starred, Tyler Duncan has withdrawn. I believe that was Wednesday or Monday or early Tuesday. So he is not in the tournament. So if you happen to fill out lineups early and had Tyler Duncan, make sure you go and change that. He has withdrawn. There's Billy Horschel. He's rated 50th in my model. The irons haven't been good lately. The length of the par 4s he doesn't play well. Difficult courses he has not traditionally played well. But there is a lot of elite here too. He's top 10 in par 3 scoring. He's top 10 on putting on Bermuda, which I've stressed all week. Anytime you're on Bermuda greens and Billy Horschel's there, you got to think about him. He's top 15 in par 4 scoring. So the biggest thing that worries me for Billy Horschel, and yes, he has some really good form by the numbers lately. Going back to the beginning of the calendar year, Century, he was bottom half because there was only, I think, 32 or 34 in the field this season for the Century. So he was bottom half there, made the cut at the Sony, top 35 or 36, so middling, and then a top 15 at the Farmers, a very difficult course, and a top 10 at the Phoenix. So very good form lately, but what is concerning, at least for me, is that these irons have been pretty bad. the irons have been pretty darn bad lately, and that just can't happen at the Honda. Now, it's very possible that he's going to have a good week. I believe his performance here at the Honda has traditionally been okay. And of course, you can't ignore the fact when he is on Bermuda greens, he generally lights them up. So it was surprising to see Billy Horschel that low for me. Somebody else that rated out quite low that I kind of expected, but maybe not this low, was Shane Lowry. We talked about him on Monday night. I went and looked at some recent results for Shane Lowry overseas, Abu Dhabi, the Saudi Invitational, and whatnot, and he's got some very, very good form coming in. I believe the lowest finish I've seen for him is a top 30. But he does not have the greatest of stats in what I'm focusing on, like his approach on the PGA Tour hasn't been very good. Putting on Bermuda has not been very good. Off the tee game, at least on the PGA Tour, hasn't been very good. He's kind of mixed that, like Billy Horschel, with some elite stuff. Difficult to par, mainly. I mean, look at this, top 10 on difficult par, or difficult rounds to par. Top 5 in birdies in those circumstances, top 10 in bogeys, and top 5 in greens in difficult situations. So, if the difficult narrative really plays out, which it does every year at PGA National, then I've got Shane Lowry way too low in these rankings, or at least based on the percentages and the stats that I used. So a little bit of foreshadowing here. I stress that you always have to choose what you lose to. It looks like I'm going to lose if Shane Lowry plays well just because he's so low in my rankings. But let's get into the price board here, and let me bring up the projected ownerships per Fantasy National. And we'll start in the 10Ks as soon as I figure out what my life's going on here. Okay. In the 10Ks, you've got Sungjae, Louis, Joaquin Neiman, Daniel Berger, and Tommy Fleetwood. No, excuse me, sorry. Brooks Koepka. Let's try this again. Sungjae, Louis, Joaquin Neiman, Daniel Berger, and Brooks Koepka in the 10Ks. And in this range, you've got no real pivots. You've got a couple of middling used guys, and it looks like the second most, 16, the top 3 most projected owned players in the field in this range. So the number one being the highest owned, projected, and the highest price, Sungjae. Sungjae sitting at 18.5%. So it's well warranted. He has played the Honda very well. He's a former champ here. I believe it was 2020. Par 4 scoring, elite. Off the tee, elite. Par 3 scoring, excellent. He doesn't putt well on Bermuda. And we talked about how he struggles with birdies on difficult courses. But he has won this event in the past. So it's very warranted that he's the most projected owned player. The price is a little restricting. And now the ownership, him being the most projected owned player, I can avoid using him as much as I was going to. Because of that, I'm still going to have some Sungjae. The next highest projected owned player, Daniel Berger, again, very warranted, just a strong all-around game. Now, the putting on Bermuda is shaky. He doesn't play the par 4s of the length here at Honda the best. It's not a disaster, but it's certainly below average. But again, 6th in strokes and approach, 5th in rounds difficult to par, top 10 in bogeys and greens difficult. The par 5 lengths he devours. So a lot to like with Daniel Berger. Again, gonna try to limit my ownership of him just because he's the second most projected owned, although the price is not as restricting as Sungjae. The two kind of middling owned players in this range is Joaquin Neiman and Brooks Koepka. And I have said it for the past 2 to 3 weeks, just because a guy plays or wins the tournament the week before doesn't preclude him from playing well the next week. Last week I had played Scheffler quite a bit, coming off the win at the Waste Management. He played well at the Genesis. The week before that, Hoagie had won, what did he win? Pebble Beach. The next week at Waste Management Phoenix Open, he played well. So just because a guy wins doesn't mean he's going to fall off, the map the next tournament. And I still believe it this week. Again, I'm not going to pick Joaquin Neiman to win. I don't pick anybody to win back-to-back tournaments. But he's number one in the data model. He's been playing excellent. You see, the worst stat he has is 54th in the field. That's top, 40%? And that's in the par 5 length here at the Honda, which is one of the least factoring metrics for leaderboard success. So while he's not elite at anything except for maybe strokes gained approach, the numbers are just solid across the board. So I like Joaquin Neiman again this week. He's sitting at 11%. Again, it's a little higher than what Hoagie was coming off his win. It's higher than what Scheffler was coming off his win. But still, I think 11% is too low. I'm going to have a lot of Neiman, especially since he's not the highest price guy on the board. The other one, Brooks. Generally, Brooks doesn't rate well in my model, and he rated pretty well last week in my data model at the Genesis, and he missed the cut. So Brooks is a bit of an enigma for me, but you can never count him out, especially on difficult courses. So the one we haven't talked about really is Louis. It's Louis, solid player, projected third most owned player. If you believe in just the caliber of player and not needing recent form, then Louis all systems go. To me, the ownership plus Louis' patented ability to withdraw makes me hesitant to use a lot of him. But there's certainly reason to use him. Look at the stats; they're just great. So that's my take on the 10Ks. If I had to rank it, it would probably honestly be Neiman, not just because of this, although he is number one in my data model. It's the fact that all the stats are good to great and one elite, and the fact of the ownership. He's the least projected owned player in the 10Ks. It seems pretty logical for me. So Neiman number one. All things considered, I'd probably go Berger number 2, then Sungjae, then Louis, then Brooks. But you really can't go wrong with anyone in this area of the price board. That's why they're up there. 9Ks: Tommy Fleetwood, Billy Horschel, Shane Lowry, Alex Noren, Matthew Wolff, Keith Mitchell, and Matt Jones. Matt Jones is your defending champion. Sorry, I'll scroll up one so just make sure you can see. So in this range, you have got one big pivot and a couple of middling owned guys, and then the rest are pretty chalky. You can probably guess who the pivot is. It's Matthew Wolff. People just, and me included, just don't know where his game is. He has played very, very sparingly. We haven't seen him since the Farmers. It was a made cut clunker. And the only time he had played this calendar year before that was the Amex, and it was a very disastrous performance. But in the fall, he had fantastic form. So where his game is, I don't really know, but the model really likes him for a couple of reasons. One being that he is very good at par 3s. He is very good on difficult courses. In fact, he is the best at getting birdies on difficult courses. And he plays the par 5s relatively well. The irons are holding him back. If this number was any better, he'd probably jump up in the model because there's a lot of high statistics there. In fact, putting on Bermuda is pretty bad as well. But he is the pivot in the area, and this is probably where I'm going to plant my flag. Honestly, if Wolff plays well, I'm going to gain a lot of leverage on people, going to gain a lot of win equity. And if he doesn't perform well, I'm going to be in trouble because he's only at 7% projected owned. Now, the chalk in this area, Billy Horschel, projected 4th most owned player. I've talked about Billy Horschel all week. Whenever he's on Bermuda, you got to pay attention. He's in great form. He plays the par 3s and the par 4s well. But he is the person I'm probably going to fade. I am choosing to lose to Billy Horschel. and I'm choosing to lose to Shane Lowry. Both of these guys, and I don't like the fact that I'm choosing to lose on Billy Horschel. It just so happens that I'm banking on the irons still being pretty bad, and that the current form, which we looked at earlier, a top 10, a top 15, is a little bit of magic considering the irons have been suspect. That is what I'm going with. Shane Lowry also worries me because he's been in great form overseas. But I'm riding the approach hasn't been good. I don't have the stats for the Abu Dhabi and the Saudi. I just see the placement. So I'm going with the irons haven't been good lately on the PGA Tour. Off the tee hasn't been good on the PGA Tour lately. And that he regresses a little bit when it's difficult. If he doesn't, I lose. So those are the two guys I'm choosing to lose to this week, Billy Horschel and Shane Lowry. It also helps that they are so highly projected owned. So this is going to be, with those two specifically, it's going to be a boom or bust. If they play well, I'm going to struggle. If they struggle, I'm going to light it up. And then elsewhere in this range, Keith Mitchell, another former champ here, I believe it was 2019. Pretty darn chalky. He's actually projected more owned than Shane Lowry. But Keith Mitchell, you'll lose to a high owned Keith Mitchell. Yeah. You can't argue that he has won this tournament before. He is good when it's difficult. The putting is certainly suspect. The length of the par fours are suspect. Keith Mitchell being the fifth projected most owned player does cause some concern, especially because I do like Matthew Wolff. I like Alex Noren, who's had some success here. Tommy Fleetwood's just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of like Shane Lowry. I just kind of don't know where his game is. It's not traditionally translated here in the States. So I'm kind of hit and miss on Tommy Fleetwood. For me, I'm going a lot of Wolff and Noren in this range. I won't forget Matt Jones either. I mean, he is a defending champ. Woodland and Mitchell are the same player to me. Yeah. The difference with Woodland is that he has had an explanation. His health has not been 100% for a while. And Woodland has had quite a bit of success here. Mitchell has the win, but I believe his other two performances were quite middling to clunkers. Woodland averages a top 30 finish in 4 tries here at the Honda. So he plays this course well, and especially a club down course means club down Gary, which, by the way, P, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in again. You mentioned Sungjae. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's understandable that he's the most owned. Great, prior form. I thought he was going to be higher than 8th in my data model. I can see it. I understand it. I like Neiman again this week, even though he won last week. I mentioned it doesn't preclude him from playing well again. But to round out the 9K, sorry, let me scroll back up for you. Like I said, I'm going to ride or die basically with Matthew Wolff. It also helps to see that he is the true pivot in the 9 and 10Ks. Where is his game? I don't really know. The model sure likes him. He did make the cut last year in his only try here at the Honda. So at least he's 1 for 1 in that regard. And using Wolff allows me to fade the Lowry. It allows me to fade the Horschel. I don't think I'm going to fade as much Keith Mitchell. But I like Wolff. I like Noren. I like Jones too. I mean, he is the defending champ, so he likes the course. Let's move to the 8s. Mito, Patrick Reed, Brian Harmon, Cameron Young, Johnny Vegas, Aaron Wise, Mackenzie Hughes, Gary Woodland, Russell Knox, and Christian Bezadenhu. And in this range, there is 2 pretty good pivots, 1 extreme pivot of the 2. Then you have 3 highly owned guys. 2 other guys, actually, I should say. 2 of them is the chalk that I'll eat, and I'm able to do that because I'm going to be so high on Matthew Wolff. So the chalky guys in the area, Johnny Vegas is at 15% projected owned. Bezadenhout is at 14.5%, and Aaron Wise is at 13.5%. I will use Aaron Wise. I think it's probably no secret by now. He's a FOMO of mine. I'll bet him anytime he's decent odds. He always rates out in the models that I make for whatever reason. I'm just going to play Aaron Wise. The other one I'll eat is Christian Bezadenhout. Because off the tee is somewhat mitigated to this course, he's actually gotten better off the tee as of late. That used to be his extreme downfall. He was always a good short game player. He was always a good putter. His irons played well enough to get to that part of his game. It was off the tee that killed him. He wasn't long and he wasn't accurate. It was a deadly combo. He's actually gotten better in both of those regards. The off the tee game is at least average to let him play with good irons and a great short game. He is one of the best putters on Bermuda in the field. His irons have been very good lately. Now the par 3 scoring, a little scary, but hey, I like Christian Bezadenhout a lot, so I'm going to use the chalk in this range, Wise and Bezadenhout. The two pivots in the area, the first one being Gary Woodland, as you mentioned, P. You're out on him. He is a pivot. He's only at 8.5%. There's enough to be concerned. He has not been healthy, really, for the past year and a half. He has played well at this event. It is a club down course. So anytime you think of club down course, you should think of Gary Woodland. In the same lines that if you know that you're on Bermuda greens, you should think Billy Horschel. But you see here, I mean, the form is not good. I mean, going back to the fall, Sanderson Farms, he misses the cut. Now, he did top 10 the CJ Cup. It is a no-cut event, but he did top 10. He played very well that week. Misses at Mayakoba, misses at Houston, misses at the Amex. A middling finish at the Farmers, and misses at Phoenix. The signs are somewhat there. I mean, he has been able to gain strokes with approach. He had one very good driving week at the CJ Cup. But the concerning thing for me about Gary Woodland is off the tee used to be his strength. And it's just not. And again, all of this 0.6 is basically predicated on one tournament. So that's a bit misleading. He's been not a disaster, but it's when off the tee is supposed to be your strength and you've lost strokes 3 out of the last 4 in that metric, there's some concern there. The saving grace for Gary Woodland this week is, as I mentioned, the prior performance course fit for PGA National. So he is sitting at 8.5%. Patrick Reed is the extreme pivot in this area. He is at 4%. So if you're willing to use Patrick Reed, and again, difficult course, he's second best on difficult courses, which means he gets his birdies and he avoids his bogeys, then you're going to gain a whole lot of leverage on people. The irons have not been good. The par 4s of the length and in general aren't good. Off the tee has been a disaster. If you're willing to play into the difficult metric, then you're going to use Shane Lowry, you're going to use Patrick Reed, and really lean into that. I'm not. As much as PGA National is indeed a tough course, difficult, every single round, every single year, that's what I'm choosing to lose to, is Shane Lowry, Billy Horschel, Patrick Reed. Patrick Reed won't hurt because he's projected 4% owned, but more so Lowry and Horschel. Elsewhere in this range, we had a pretty good discussion Monday, as I mentioned, about Russell Knox. Russell Knox will be a very good case study for prior performance at a course. So course fit versus current form. Current form says, again, number 1 in approach, number 2 in par 3s, number 1 in greens and difficult courses. But he's 1 for 5 making the cut here at PGA National. So, I see him ranked 6th. I'm going to use him. He is middling in ownership, a little bit on the high side. He's at 12%. Somebody I really like, Mackenzie Hughes. He's only at 10%. Cameron Young, last week's runner-up. He's only at 10%. There's a lot to like with him. Number 1 in par 4s, number 1 off the tee. The thing with Cameron Young is I don't know if the club down course is going to suit him. He announced his presence with mashing it off the tee at the Genesis. How is he going to do when he has to club down and hit fairway metals and irons off the tee and play position? I don't know. He's rated 15th because of the recent success off the tee and all that stuff. This might not be a good course fit for him. In fact, I don't think it's a great course fit. Just thinking through it, but I could be wrong. He wasn't rated in the top half last week and goes out and damn near wins the tournament. So Brian Harman usually doesn't rate well. I'll have a lot of Brian Harman this week. The irons are scary, but par 4 scoring, difficulty on or scoring on difficult rounds, lengths of par 4s. There's quite a bit to like with Brian Harman. He is at 10%. And there's a look at the 8Ks. We didn't talk about Mito. He's kind of like Russell Knox. He's at 12%. Seems like it would be a good course fit for Mito. So that's my take on the 8Ks. I like Mackenzie Hughes. I like Brian Harman. I'm definitely going to eat some chalk on Wise and Bezadenhout. I just can't avoid it. I think these are two very good options this week. What's up, Joey? Thanks for tuning in, pal. You're catching us pretty much halfway through the show. The 10s and 9s, we just went over the 8s. You'll fade Mito? Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Yeah, I understand why, the high ownership and whatnot. Boa is definitely his best putting surface. He is not the best when it's difficult, but the putting has been very good. That's a lot of it's predicated on the POA, but he did gain at Phoenix. He gained a bunch at the RSM, which is again another short Bermuda track. Houston is a long Bermuda track. I mean, he's just a good putter in general. The irons have been good. He's had a couple of bad ones at Pebble and at RSM, but generally the irons are good. I don't think they're this good, but they're good. I'll probably use Mito. Just being honest, if you fade him and he doesn't play well, you're gonna be gaining a lot there, P. I'll tell you that much. I'm not sure I can get off of him. So there's a look at the 8Ks. Let's move to the high 7s. You've got Taylor Moore, Ryan Palmer, Denny McCarthy, Lee Westwood, KH Lee, CT Pan, Ricky Fowler, Ian Poulter, the new Nikolai Højgaard, which has people very excited to see his debut, Chris Kirk, Brendan Todd, and Michael Thompson. So let's address the elephant in the room. You see Ricky Fowler, you see a star by his name, and you see him in the top 30 of my rankings. I don't like it. I am not comfortable with that. But the data says what it says. It rated him 27th. He is not good at getting birdies on difficult courses, but he's great at avoiding bogeys. He is top 30 in this field in irons. I'll be kind, say top 30 in the field on difficult rounds. It does not make me feel great to see Ricky Fowler in the top 30 in my rankings, but he's there. I don't know how I feel about it. Well, I know how I feel about it. I don't feel great. So I'll address that elephant in the room real quick. Let's see. In the high 7s, you've got no real chalky plays. You do have a couple of guys that are getting some love here. Chris Kirk, he's the closest to chalk. He's actually really close to chalk. He's at just under 13%. Okay. There's enough to be worried about. The off-the-tee game is good. The irons are good. Actually, I should say the off-the-tee game is excellent. Irons are good. Par 3 scoring is good. He definitely doesn't do the best on difficult courses, so enough to be worried about. Seeing him at right at 13% or just under it. It's a pretty good fade for me. Let's see. We talked about Fowler, Ian Poulter. KH Lee, again, he started because he's in the top half of my data model. I'm not in love with KH Lee. Off the tee is okay. Par 3 and par 4 scoring is okay, but the irons have not been good. Difficult rounds, a disaster for KH Lee. The putting has been an unmitigated disaster. So, Denny McCarthy, he's been rating out very well lately. He has helped me be successful some weeks. He's let me down some weeks. I don't think he's number 7 in this field, but number 2 in par 4 scoring. He's always going to be one of the best putters in the field. On top of the number 2 in par 4 scoring, he's 6th at the range or length of par 4s. He plays well when it's difficult. The irons are suspect for sure. The length of par 5s are okay. So, I mean, McCarthy rates 7th. Means I'm going to use him. I don't think he's 7th best, to be honest with you. He sits at 10.5%, so a little bit chalky for the area, but overall, not a pivot, not chalk, just getting used. In this range, you've got Palmer at 9%, the aforementioned Denny McCarthy at 10.5%, Chris Kirk at 13%, and Michael Thompson's getting some love. He's at 10%. I've seen a lot of people like Michael Thompson this week. I'm not there. I don't see it. I don't know. Maybe they're focused on this par 3 scoring. I don't know. I'm not there with Michael Thompson. Who I am there on, I mentioned Denny McCarthy. I like Taylor Moore quite a bit. I think, I've said it a couple times before, I think he is the best Korn Ferry Tour grad. I think he's the most well-rounded. Now, granted, Cameron Young has the extreme amount of upside. You've seen that by finishing second last week at the Genesis. Sahith Theegala has had a couple of very high finishes, one in the fall and then one recently. I think it was the Phoenix. So I like Taylor Moore. And a lot of the reason for that is I don't think the irons are that bad. At least they weren't on the Korn Ferry Tour. I really don't think the irons are that bad. He had a pretty disastrous Amex and still made the cut. I mean, that's pretty astonishing for me. If you have that bad of a week with the irons and still at least make the cut. He had bad Shriners. So, again, I think he's better than this .3. I know he's a lot better than this. And as long as the rest of the game stays relatively where it's at, the higher finishes will come through. I mean, he did top 10 the RSM. He is coming off a top 20 and a top 25. There's a lot to like with Taylor Moore. And again, I think he's just going to be serviceable in DFS. And he is sitting at 7%, so he's a pretty good pivot off the guys in this range, especially, at 100 more, Christian Bezuidenhout is double the projected ownership of him. If you want to avoid the Bezuidenhout chalk, take a look at Taylor Moore. Let's see. You've got Højgaard, who I believe it was, I don't know, I can't remember if it was UP or if it was Darnell Monday night that said they were going to use Højgaard. I'm not going to use him only simply because I just don't know how to evaluate him, and he's got all blanks. I don't know how to use somebody if they don't have any stats. So he's rated literally right in the middle of my data model because he's neutral. He is sitting at 2.5%. So if you're comfortable using the hype and or comfortable using the unknown, Højgaard's going to get a lot of leverage for you if he does well. I think that's a pretty good look at the high sevens. Let's move to the low sevens. You got Aaron Rai, Grayson Sigg, Lucas Glover, Sepp Straka, Charles Howell, Villegas, Carrick Higgo, Martin Keimer, Lucas Herbert, Taylor Pendrith, Nick Taylor, Zach Johnson, Brendan Steele, Sam Ryder, Alex Smalley, Chad Ramey, Matthias Schwab, Hudson Swafford, Stuart Sink, Dylan Fratelli, Davis Riley, Doc Redmond, Adam Svensson, Danny Willett, Kevin Streelman, Heinrich Stenson, and Rory Sabatini. I always hate the low sevens because there's a million people in it. In this range, you have a few, I'd say 3, it looks like, Commonly used players, again, not the most chalky, just chalky for the area. Aaron Rye is right at 13%, so a little bit higher than Chris Kirk, but just by a little bit. So Aaron Rye is at 13. Lucas Glover is at 12%, which makes a whole lot of sense. He has some great form here at the Honda. So that people are gravitating towards the prior course fit or prior course performance. And then at the bottom of the low sevens, Hudson Swafford at 7,100 is getting some play, likely because of the hot streak, the win at the Amex. I mean, his irons are dialed in, that's for sure. He's sitting at 9.5%. So let's talk a little bit through the low sevens here. As much as I like Aaron Rye, it's going to be an easier fade for me seeing him at 13%, which is one of the most chalky in the area. So that's an easier fade for me. I'll probably have him a little bit, but not nearly as much. We talked about Glover, great prior success here at the Honda, but generally this area of the price board is getting ignored. So if guys or if other contestants are not using this area, they're either dipping their toes in the 6Ks, which a quick foreshadowing look says not really. So that means they're bottoming out usually at Hudson Swafford. So that tells me that if they are using a high-end guy like a Sungjae, like a Neiman, like a Berger, they're definitely going, say, Berger into, down into the low sevens. Maybe Aaron Wise is their second player, maybe even a Bezadenhout, because the low sevens are getting ignored. Like I said, Aaron Rye's at 13%, Glover is at 12%, Hudson Swafford 9.5%. Literally everybody else is below 9%. Carrick Higgo is somebody that I'll take some speculation on. Winner at the Palmetto last year. He's okay on Bermuda. Now, he hasn't played his best when it's been difficult, at least his short time on the PGA Tour. The irons, again, kind of like Taylor Moore, I don't think they're this bad. You saw just how good they can be at the Palmetto. They can also be, pretty bad as well. But the off-the-tee game is consistent. I'd be curious to see, actually, let's look at fairways and greens really quickly for Higgo. It's all in distance, so that could be an issue this week for him. I'll probably take some speculation on Higgo, seeing that he is a bit of a pivot in this area. So look at Higgo. I say Camilo Villegas a lot. He always rates out well in the model, and then he's usually middling to bad. So I've been cautious about Camilo recently, even when he rates out well. Having said that, he's at 3.5%. He's good at the length of the par fours. He's good at par fours in general. He's good on difficult rounds. It's just something with Camilo that he hasn't played well when I've used him. So makes me a little bit gun shy. I like Charles Howell. Charles Howell sitting at 5%. I like him quite a bit. I like Grayson Sigg. Now the putting is a disaster. And he, in his short time on the PGA Tour, he hasn't played difficult courses well. But the irons are there. A lot to like. The par 4 scoring is there. A lot to like. So I like Grayson Sigg a little bit as a speculation. Let's see. Taylor Pendrith I like. All about the off-the-tee game for him. Par 3 scoring is pretty darn good too. Par 4. And he has shown that he can play well when it is difficult. Can't use Villegas unless he uses that Spider-Man stance. Miguel Angel Jimenez, the Champions Tour player. But I do distinctly remember the spider crawl view that he had. If Villegas did it, then I don't remember it, but if he did, then I'll take your word for it. But I do know Miguel Angel Jimenez did. I remember distinctly the Masters that he was doing that. But yeah, so I mean, Villegas usually is a pretty good putter. Definitely Vajegas. Okay. Absolutely. I'll believe you. I'll probably use a little bit of Vajegas, although, to be fair, I'm a little gun shy on it, just because he's let me down in the past. I like Taylor Pendrith, like I mentioned. Alex Smalley, I'm really high on. Chad Ramey, another Korn Ferry Tour grad, I'm high on. Davis Riley. A lot of people on social media, I've mentioned how I'm going into Sunday and I got to rely on Davis Riley. Should I just prepare for the disappointment now? The fact that he has gotten a lineup to contention on Sunday just shows that he's just pretty darn consistent. He's had a couple of really bad Sundays, but Bermuda is his best surface. He has played well when it's difficult. Now the overall numbers don't look great, but remember at the at the Amex, I mean, he was right there. I think he was in the penultimate group or third to last group, and he started the day with a triple bogey, and that just basically removed him from the tournament. Davis Riley, I mean, yeah, he shot a 78 on Sunday because he had went low, 66, 69, 68. I mean, the talent's there. He's been there on the leaderboards. He's just had bad Sundays. So I like Davis Riley. Where he at 7,000s. Adams Vinson, Korn Ferry Tour grad. A little bit of a speculation, but there's a quick look on the 7Ks. Like I said, I like Charles Howell. I will take some speculation on Higgo. I like Sig quite a bit. As much as I like Rye, I'll be pivoting away from him just because of his 13% projected ownership. So yeah, there's a look at the 7Ks. Let's try to, or the low 7s, excuse me. Let's take a look at some quick 6Ks. Patrick Rogers, coming off a poor performance, a miscut at the Genesis when a lot of people had him. One of the two things that saved me last week is that I faded the Rogers chalk. In this range, there is nobody that is above 8.5%, and that is, let's see, Mark Hubbard is at 8.5%. Very interesting. I mean, I have him starred. He's in the top, 40 something in my data model? No, 66. So he's just above half. Okay, probably around the par threes, and the irons have been good lately. I'm high on Patrick Rogers. The irons haven't been good, but he is okay. When you're coming down this low, you're going to have to accept some flaws in players. The irons are bad, but he's played well when it's difficult. He putts well enough on Bermuda. Par 3 scoring's good. Neesmith's been kind of hot lately. Take a look at Kramer Hickok. He has had good course form here. He is top 25 when it is difficult. You wouldn't think that from Kramer Hickok. But really, the only struggle has been putting. All it takes is a hot week with the putter, and it can get very good very quickly. And I mean, Bermuda is his preferred surface. He's just a bad putter in general, but Bermuda is his preferred surface. Houston, you see here when he top 5'd, that's Bermuda greens. He gained 5. Before that it was really bad, but all it takes is a hot week. The irons have been okay. Genesis, Phoenix not too good. Sony and Houston good to very good. So erratic, definitely erratic. But take a look at Kramer Hickok. He's had some good form here at the Honda. Smotherman, which is somebody that Richard mentioned. There's a lot to like there. The irons have been very good. The par 4 scoring we mentioned, that was good, and the length of the par 4s. Even the par 5 length he's good at. So take a look at Austin Smotherman. Let's see. Kadira, Hayden Buckley. Hayden Buckley I've used quite a bit in the past before. I'm going to ignore Hankley Biota. He's let me down quite a bit in the fall. I'm really not too comfortable coming down too much further than this. I mean, honestly, it's really kind of Kodira and Buckley that I am comfortable bottoming out at. Like I said, I have these guys starred only because they're in the top half of my data model, but I still don't feel great coming to them. There's a look at the 6Ks, and if you joined late, I mentioned in the intro that on social media, on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, that I had pondered a player that was in the 6Ks. He had dominated the Korn Ferry Tour in par 3 scoring on difficult rounds. And I don't want to spoil it for you. So jump on social media, see if you can't figure out who it is, because it's interesting. It really was interesting to see. It's over. Billy Horschel is trending on Twitter, all betting tips. Yeah, a lot of people are on Billy Horschel this week, and I think it is revolving around the current form. And the results are very, very good. They are. You've got a top, 25. Granted, it's a no-cut, very small field. A middling Sony Open, but a top 15 and a top 10. But this is what worries me about Billy Horschel. The irons have been bad. They have been bad. I'm torn on Billy. Seeing him as the 5th most projected owned player definitely helps me fade him more than what I would normally, because he doesn't rate out the highest in my data model. A lot of people I've seen, yeah, you're right, P. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter betting him outright and all that stuff. I'm choosing to lose to Billy Horschel. I'm choosing to lose to him, and I'm choosing to lose to Shane Lowry. Those are the two I'm choosing to lose to this week. Conversely, if Matthew Wolff doesn't play well, I'm also going to struggle. Because not only is Matthew Wolff a pivot at 7%, he's right around the price range of Horschel and Lowry. So there's a look at the price board. Let's move on over to Microsoft Excel, and I didn't even realize that we are already at an hour. But don't worry, I will definitely get to any of your questions and lineups and all that stuff. Let me switch to Microsoft Excel view here, and then still bring up chat. Let me scroll over here so you all can see. Again, I am not a prominent tiers player, but for those who do play tiers, your tier 1, Louis, Sungjae, and Berger. Choose one. To me, it's probably Louis, but he carries the most risk because of withdrawal. I mean, choose one. They're all good. Tier 2, Neiman, Wolff, Noren, Tommy Fleetwood, Brooks Koepka. To me, I would go Neiman. Number 1 player in the model. He's in good form. Although, if tiers ownership is anything like classic ownership or tournament ownership, then take a look at Wolff, because he seems to be a big pivot. But I think it'd be between these two for me. Tier 3, Mito, Matt Jones, Shane Lowry, Billy Horschel, Patrick Reed. That's it. So I'm out on those 3 for the reasons we talked about earlier. For me, it's between Mito and Matt Jones. I'll take Mito. Tier 4, Russell Knox, Poseidon Mitchell, Cameron Young, Brian Harmon, Gary Woodland, and Lee Westwood. Well, Lee Westwood is next to last in my data model, so that tells you everything you need to know about Lee Westwood. Knox is okay. Poseidon, probably going to be really chalky, but he's probably the best player in the tier. Mitchell, Cameron Young, Harmon, Woodland. I think I'm going with Russell Knox, knowing that it's a risk because he has not played this event well in the past. But really, honestly, it's a kind of choose. Do you want to choose the chalk in this tier? Or do you want to choose the upside like Cameron Young? It's kind of dependent on what you've done in the first 3 tiers and the 2 tiers after. I think I'm going to go Knox, but I can see a valid situation for all 6. Tier 5, Aaron Wise, Mac Hughes, Johnny Vegas, Taylor Moore, Ricky, Ryan Palmer, and K.H. Lee. No on K.H. Lee, no on Palmer. So that leaves Ricky. Don't feel comfortable about it. Taylor Moore, Johnny Vegas, Mac Hughes, and Wise. I think for me it's going to go probably Mac Hughes because of projected ownership. So Hughes, Wise, and then Vegas. No, I'm sorry. Hughes, Wise, Taylor Moore, and then Johnny Vegas. And if you're a Ricky truther, then Ricky, 5th. Tier 6, Villegas, Aaron Rai, Carrick Higgo, Lucas Glover, Ian Poulter, Martin Keimer, and Sepp Straka. No thanks to the bottom 3. Lucas Glover, if you want to believe in prior course performance, Carrick Higgo is the speculation. Aaron Rye is probably the safest, and Vajegas rates higher and highest in my model. So Rye is probably the most consistent or baseline. Higgo for speculation, Glover for prior performance at the Honda. All right, so let's get into building some lineups here. Bring back up the projected ownerships. Let's see if we can figure out a chalky lineup or two here. I apologize for the noise as I get the keyboard moved around and set up so that way you all can somewhat see me and I can type comfortably. Let's see. We're just going to use the most popular play right now, and that's Sungjae. He is the projected most owned player. So if guys are going to Sungjae, we saw that they were most comfortable bottoming out at Hudson Swafford. So it's always best to kind of define your boundaries. Let me check. Yeah, okay, you all can see that. I always have to check that. So if they're going Sungjae and bottoming out not at a 6K, then that means they have to come pretty far down to use their second. So it looks like we're gonna use Aaron Wise for them, and we might have to come down to Bezadenhout off of Aaron Wise. But there's a look at a start of a chalky team. Let's see. If you go up from Hudson Swafford, the next is Aaron Rye at 74, Lucas Glover at 74. Just because he's the most popular, let's try Aaron Rye. That gives you 8,000 per. Bezadenhout's right at 8. I said 800, I think 8,000. So that leaves you 81. At 81 is Russell Knox, who's getting some play. Denny McCarthy's at 10.5. Yeah, so I'll say Lucas Glover just because of the prior form. So there's a look at a pretty chalky-ish lineup, 13.5%, matching your contestants in a big GPP. You are leaving some money on the table, but again, I'm just emphasizing the chalkiness of it. And then if the highest 6K projected owned player, like I mentioned, is Mark Hubbard at 7.8%. So if people are going down into the 6Ks, it's just a 6,900 at Mark Hubbard. Conversely, if they're trying to build a balanced lineup, actually it's probably going to be avoiding all of the 10Ks. I can imagine them starting at, say, Billy and then going Lowry right behind them. Still that's 5% just in those two alone. And then working their way down from there. Chris Kirk might be in this a little bit. Again, I'm just trying to use different guys like Aaron Wise, Bezadenhout would probably be in this. Michael Thompson is getting some love. We're still at 8,000 per, so that is Bezadenhout. And then you're still at 8,000 for the guys I've mentioned above. Ryan Palmer, maybe they're taking a little bit off one of these guys, going Russell Knox. I'll use, I used McCarthy. No, I didn't use McCarthy. Okay. So there's a look at perhaps a balanced-ish team. That's still at 13%. Kirk higher owned than I would have. Yeah. Like I said, he's projected just under 13. I don't know. Let me scroll over here, see Chris Kirk. Where's he ranked? 37th. So they're looking probably at the irons. The irons have, to be fair, have been pretty okay lately. Par 3 scoring is good, good. Par 4 scoring is good. Off the tee has been excellent. And generally, Chris Kirk is the fairway portion of off the tee. So there's a lot to like with that, just due to the course layout. I agree with you, P, in the sense that 12.8 is higher than I would have thought, but I can understand the logic behind it. I guess is how I would put that. So let's try to build a lineup that combats all of this with some leverage and still some very, very high upside. And I mentioned it, during the going over my rankings, going over the 10Ks. Just because a guy wins the previous week doesn't preclude him from playing well the next week. Now, Neiman is higher than Hoagie was coming off his win. He's higher projected owned than last week's Scotty Scheffler coming off Scheffler's win at the Waste Management. But it's still only 11%. Like, I like Neiman again this week. Yes, he's number one on the data model. I'm not going to pick him to win. But for DFS purposes, sure. I mean, yes, he's expensive. You kind of need a top 10 out of that, or, a big round of, bogey-free eagles and runs of birdies or whatnot. But I still think Joaquin Neiman's a good play. And you're avoiding the chalk of Sungjae and Louis and Berger. So I'm going to start this team with Neiman. And by all means, guys, jump in if you want to see certain players at price ranges or whatnot. But a very common start that I've had is Wolff Neiman. Wolff is a true pivot at just over 7%. So I'm matching 3% of other contestants. When they did Billy Horschel and Shane Lowry, it was already at 5%. And again, I mentioned a few names in the 6Ks. I'm just going to do the one that I have been the most comfortable with. It's not the lowest I'm willing to go, but it's kind of, not necessarily my highest confidence, but I think is going to be the most consistent performer in the 6Ks, which is Kramer Hickok. So that leaves me 7,800 per. This kind of depends on what route I want to take. If I want to go stars and scrubsy, I can do a Gary Woodland, which I know you're not high on P, but he's he's a pivot. Taylor Moore is a pivot that I like this week. Let's see. If I really want to be a masochist, I could do Ricky. He is only at 5.5% projected ownership. That leaves me 7,900, which is Ryan Palmer plus Taylor. I could do both of them. If I wanted to, say, maybe come off Ricky, come down quite a bit to, I don't know, Alex Smalley maybe, Taylor Pendrith. I mentioned how I liked Taylor Pendrith. He's at 72. This leaves me 83 now. That's Mackenzie Hughes, who I really like. So there's a style of lineup that I have been gravitating towards. It's fairly balanced in the sense of I've got a 10. I know it's out of order. I apologize. I got a 10, a 9, a low 8, a high 7, a low 7, and a 6. But it's only 7.5% projected to match, my other contestants in a big GPP. You get the upside certainly with Matthew Wolff. Now it could crash and burn too, but you certainly have the upside. I would think you would get the consistency from a high level performer like Neiman. You're going to be consistent like Daniel Berger. You think Berger is consistent. Now he might have the more win probability than Neiman, but I still think Neiman is right there at least this week with Berger in terms of consistency. Taylor Moore is a pretty good pivot speculative play that if he top 20s, you're gaining quite a bit. I like Mac Hughes a lot this week, so I like that lineup quite a bit, and it's at 7.5%. If you wanted to do, I don't know, if you wanted to eat some chalk, you could go maybe start with Louis. You go Louis, and again, I used Matthew Wolff. I don't want to use the same people. Maybe you want to take Matt Jones, the defending champion. Let's see. Again, feel free to jump in chat, guys. I'm here to help you all and figure out some lineups that you all might want to gravitate towards. If you're willing to take a chance on a complete unknown, you can go Nikolai Højgaard. He has a lot of hype around him. I just don't know anything about him. So there's Højgaard. If you want to take the risk, he's only at 2.5% owned. Let's see. If you want to take some real big speculation, We talked about, Doug Gim, who I wasn't really all that high on. We talked about Nick Hardy on Monday. We talked about Austin Smotherman. He had some good stats to look for, so you can go Austin Smotherman. There are ways to build lineups this week to avoid your big-time chalky plays. The Keith Mitchells, the Shane Lowrys, the Billy Horschels, and whatnot. To fill this lineup out, if you believe in Cameron Young and think he's going to repeat on the success, it still gives you 7,200, which is Taylor Pendrith. Sam Ryder, who's had some very good prior success here at the Honda. Zach Johnson, Nick Taylor, Brendan Steele. If I'm going down this low, I'm going to do 7,100, maybe like Alex Smalley or Chad Ramey, who I really like from the Corn Ferry Tour. And that's still only just over 7.5% matching. So there are definitely ways to avoid the chalk this week. If you're willing to, it's always going to be a risk, obviously, but if you're willing to stick to a narrative, Billy Horschel on Bermuda, good play. There are plenty of other good putters on Bermuda. You've got, he's chalky. Cameron Young's been good. Charles Howe III, he's top 20 in putting on Bermuda. He sits at 5% projected owned. I don't know why I was looking over here when it's right here. Dumbass. Vajegas, Kadira, Alex Noren. Alex Noren's had great success here at the Honda. He's a little bit more expensive at 93, but he's only at 10% or 10.5. Matthias Schwab. There's Higgo, speculative. Matthias Schwab, 2% owned. So if you're wanting to bank on the Bermuda putting narrative, if you want to go on the difficulty, Lowry has been playing very well on difficult rounds. Where did he go? He's down here somewhere. Lowry, he's number 8. But you come down here a little bit more. 12th, Brooks Koepka. He's at 12%, but he's still not as highly owned as Shane Lowry. You got Tommy Fleetwood here. Andrew Novak. I'm not comfortable going this far low, but if you want to lean into the difficult narrative, Andrew Novak's top 30 in difficulty, and he's at not even 2%, 0.5% owned, and at this far down to the price where you can squeeze in even more higher price guys. This is certainly a lineup of speculation, but I'm just going to use an example, as a 20th lineup in a 20 entry max tournament, it's worth a shot. I know you're not high on Gary Woodland, but if you're believing in the difficulty, 18th in difficulty. Harmon, he's at 10%, but he's 11th. Kramer Hickok, like I mentioned. There's Rye, he's pretty chalky. Davis Riley, Chad Ramey. Even these guys like Vajegas, Vegas, Patrick Rogers. So there are ways to get around the chalk this week. I'll keep the show going for a couple minutes if you guys want to see any last minute players or any lineups that you might want to try to get in really quickly. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this week. Hopefully it's going to be a lot better than the past 2 weeks, and a whole lot better than Waste Management. Like I said, the Genesis was a losing week, but it wasn't terrible. Neiman saved me. I had quite a bit of Neiman. I was high on Scheffler, but Rory killed me. Sergio killed me. Paul Casey, just because of the error in not using false statistics for the European guys. But it looks like that's going to be the end of it. We went a few minutes over, 20 minutes over, but again, I don't mind. I just try to keep it at an hour or about, just for the consistency of the shows. But again, guys, thanks for tuning in like you always do. P, Joey, it's really appreciated. I enjoy the interaction. Good luck with all your contests this week. Again, on social media, on Twitter, or in the comments of this video, let me know how you're doing throughout the weekend. Would love to hear about that. So for any wagers that you have made this week at the Honda Classic, for all of your contests this week at the Honda Classic, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.